There was a moment today when heaven paused, not because of a headline, not because of a miracle broadcast to the world, but because of you. In a place no one saw, with trembling hands or a tired heart, you made a decision. Quiet, unseen, maybe even unsure, but holy. And the moment you did, God smiled. Welcome to Chosen One's Sanctuary, where the hidden are revealed, the weary are restored, and the remnant remembers who they are. You didn't click this by accident. You were drawn here because something happened in the spirit realm. And now heaven wants you to understand what you just set in motion. Today, with one small act of obedience, you fulfilled something written long ago, not in ink, but in fire, in the scroll of your life that only heaven could read. And when you moved, even if it was just a whisper of faith, the enemy's plan cracked, and God's laughter echoed through eternity. This is not emotional fluff. This is not vague encouragement. Psalm 2:4 declares that the one seated on the throne laughs, because no demonic scheme can undo what he has already decreed. And Zephaniah 3:17 reminds us that he rejoices over his people with singing, with dancing, with joy. So what did you do that made God smile today? Stay with me until the end of this message, because by the time we finish, you will understand how this quiet decision, the one no one applauded, the one you weren't even sure counted, was actually the key that unlocked the next chapter of your divine assignment. We are about to uncover why the heavens celebrated you, and why your obedience today is echoing in places your voice has never touched. Let's begin. Heaven watches the smallest acts. There are moments in your life that pass like whispers, unnoticed by crowds and unrecorded by cameras, but they thunder in heaven. Moments so small that even you almost dismissed them. A whispered prayer in the dark, a silent decision to forgive someone who never said sorry, a step forward when the weight of despair made it easier to stay in bed. These moments don't break headlines, but they break chains. Zechariah 4:10 asks, "Who dares despise the day of small beginnings?" It is not a suggestion. It is a rebuke to the systems of man that idolize spectacle and dismiss the sacred. Heaven does not celebrate performance. It celebrates faith. And when you moved today, when you did the right thing quietly, without applause, without clarity, without a guarantee, heaven responded, not with distant tolerance, but with joy. God smiled, because only the chosen ones know how to obey when obedience costs visibility. There is a divine measurement that weighs not how loud, but how loyal, not how big, but how aligned. You think it was just a small gesture, but in the language of the Spirit, it was a signal fire sent upward, confirming to heaven that you're still in the fight, still watching, still choosing light. Think of Ruth, a widowed outsider who chose to follow her mother-in-law back to Bethlehem, unnoticed by kings, unknown to prophets. But her loyalty, her small beginning, positioned her in the lineage of the Messiah. One quiet choice changed eternity, not because it was public, but because it was prophetic. So when you moved today, though no one clapped and no door seemed to open, heaven stood in honor. The throne room smiled. Because God knows where small faith leads. He knows what happens when a chosen one moves in hidden obedience. And yet, what you did was more than just seen. It broke something open. And now, we must explore what was shaken in the unseen realm. The act that broke open the heavens. What if the very moment you doubted the most was the moment all of heaven leaned in? What if what you thought was hesitation was actually spiritual warfare, and you won? You didn't just make a decision today. You broke through resistance. You didn't just choose to keep going. You declared war on everything sent to stop you. The act itself may have seemed small: forgiving, praying, showing up, choosing peace. But in the heavens, it was recorded as alignment. And when alignment meets divine timing, something splits. There are moments in history that heaven waits for. Esther stepping into the king's courts. David walking toward a giant. Mary saying yes to an angel. These weren't spontaneous. They were rehearsed in heaven long before they happened on earth. And your moment, today, may have been one of those rehearsed moments. A fulfillment of a spiritual appointment only God could schedule. When you moved in obedience, you stepped into a timeline God had prepared. And because of that, angels were dispatched. Delays were disrupted. Assignments were activated. Something opened, not just for you, but for everyone tied to your obedience. That is what it means to be chosen. Not just to carry favor, but to carry access. When you obey, others eat from the harvest. When you submit, strongholds tremble. When you align, heaven invades earth. You may feel like you just made it through the day. But in the spirit, today was a breaking point, and heaven smiled. Because you made the choice hell never expected, and the enemy's confusion has only just begun. Heaven's smile, hell's confusion. There is a sound the enemy hates. It is not the sound of loud preaching, not the roar of a crowd. It is the quiet sound of a chosen one obeying God in secret. That sound, soft as it may seem on earth, echoes like thunder in hell. It disrupts the blueprint of every demonic delay, because it means the chosen one remembered who they were, and today you did exactly that. Psalm 2:4 says, "The one enthroned in heaven laughs," not out of mockery, but triumph. God laughs because no force in hell, no betrayal, no childhood wound, no generational curse, no delay or diagnosis can override the obedience of someone sealed by his purpose. God laughed today, not at your enemies, but over your obedience. Because when you acted, the enemy lost strategic ground he had been guarding for years. And hell is confused. Because your patterns were predictable. Your discouragement was working. The whispers of shame had almost silenced you. The timing was perfect from the enemy's point of view. But then you did the one thing he didn't account for. You stepped again, trusted again, prayed again. And that obedience cracked the rhythm of the enemy's assault. It created an interruption. In the realm of the spirit, obedience is not passive. It is warfare. And when a chosen one moves under divine instruction, they cause tremors across both realms. That is why Satan fights your obedience with such precision, because he knows its power. And he knows that when you obey, you don't just move forward, you tear something down. The devil is not threatened by talent. He is terrified of obedience, because obedience is proof of intimacy, and intimacy with God leads to authority. Authority to break chains. Authority to shift rooms. Authority to resurrect what was declared dead. That is why today's obedience was met with laughter in heaven and panic in hell. You may not have felt the war, but the shift happened, and God saw it all. But why is joy such a powerful weapon in this battle? Why would God smile at all? Because joy, divine joy, is not just an emotion. It is strategy. Why joy is a weapon. In the war for your soul, joy is not a luxury. It is a shield. The book of Nehemiah declares, "The joy of the Lord is your strength." Not strategy, not striving, not performance, joy. Because joy, true joy, only exists where trust lives, and nothing disrupts hell's momentum like a chosen one who still smiles, still worships, still hopes, even in the middle of a storm. God's smile is not passive. It is permission. It is power. It says, the fight is turning. When God rejoices, it is because he sees something the enemy cannot stop. His joy is not based on your perfection, but on your alignment. When you align today, through that decision, that prayer, that obedience, his joy exploded, and that joy became a weapon in your war. There is a reason the enemy sends heaviness. There is a reason depression stalks the chosen, because joy is the first sign that resurrection has begun. If the enemy can take your joy, he can take your strength. But when you choose joy anyway, even if it's a flicker, the chains begin to loosen. Joy is resistance. It is your announcement to the spiritual realm that hope is not dead, that the story is not over, that you still believe in what God whispered, even if the room is silent. And when heaven smiles at you, it is a confirmation that something eternal just took place, even if no one clapped for it down here. But the question remains, why did this moment happen now? What shifted today of all days? The answer is found not just in the act, but in the timing. And timing is everything for the chosen ones. Chosen ones are trained in obscurity. Before God reveals you, he refines you. And the training ground of the chosen is rarely a stage. It is a silent place, a wilderness, a routine job, a private battle no one claps for. You've been asking why it's been so quiet, why the doors stayed shut, why the recognition never came, why the effort seemed invisible. But heaven hasn't been ignoring you. It's been preparing you. God hides his chosen ones, not because they are unworthy, but because they are dangerous before their time. Just like David, who was anointed in private before he ever saw Goliath. He spent years tending sheep while holding a crown in his spirit. And it was the hidden place that forged the warrior. You have felt that ache, the ache of invisibility, of praying while others rise, of staying faithful when your wilderness feels endless. But that obscurity was not punishment. It was preservation. Because public elevation without private consecration will destroy the assignment. God hid you to keep you whole. Moses spent 40 years on the backside of the desert after fleeing Egypt. Not because he was disqualified, but because the fire in him wasn't yet clean. The call was real, but the method needed purification. The same is true for you. The delay wasn't denial. It was sanctification. Some of you watching this know what it feels like to be overlooked in every room you've entered. But the truth is, you were never overlooked. You were shielded. Because if they had seen you too soon, they would have misused you. And if you had risen without healing, your brokenness would have been weaponized. Obscurity is a cocoon. Painful, tight, dark, but sacred. It is where God speaks clearest, where distractions fall away, where motives are exposed and idols are shattered. The chosen ones are trained here because their mission is too weighty to be built on applause. The mantle requires solitude before influence, clarity before platform. That moment of obedience today, that small step no one saw, it marked the end of one season of obscurity and the beginning of something new. Heaven's smile confirmed it. You passed a test only God was watching, and that test unlocked timing, because timing is sacred. And for the chosen, alignment with heaven's clock changes everything. Your step, aligned with prophetic timing. Obedience is powerful, but obedience at the right time is destiny. Esther was told by Mordecai, "Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this?" That verse has echoed for generations, but it wasn't about her beauty. It wasn't even about her boldness. It was about her timing. She could have spoken too early and been ignored. She could have waited too long and been silenced. But she moved when heaven moved. And that timing preserved a nation. You didn't just obey today. You obeyed on time. And that makes all the difference. Some delays are spiritual, but some are human. Sometimes, destiny tarries not because of demonic warfare, but because the chosen one hesitates. The enemy wants to convince you to wait, to stall, to pray about it forever. Because delayed obedience is still disobedience when timing matters. But you didn't wait this time. You moved. You chose to forgive. You spoke the truth. You stepped into the new. And that act synchronized you with the scroll heaven already wrote about you. That's why you felt such internal shift. Because your spirit knows something eternal was just unlocked. When a chosen one aligns with divine timing, the earth must respond. Relationships shift. Access increases. Attacks intensify. Not because something is wrong, but because something is right. This is the moment where heaven starts to accelerate what it once concealed. The moment where things that felt stuck begin to move. And it began not with a miracle, but with your obedience. Timed obedience is a portal. It opens what striving never could. But obedience doesn't just open heaven. It invites something else. Favor. Not favor based on performance, but favor born from God's delight. And when God smiles, He doesn't just observe. He releases. And what He's about to release is more than blessing. It is legacy. It is ripple. It is breakthrough. For you and for those connected to you. Because when God smiles, it's never just a moment. It's a movement. What the smile of God unlocks. When God smiles, it is not symbolic. It is legislative. It is the face of heaven bending toward earth and issuing a decree that no principality can override. The smile of God is not soft approval. It is sacred endorsement. It is God saying, "Proceed." And when He smiles over a chosen one, doors swing open that were sealed for generations. Scripture tells us in Psalm 35, His favor lasts a lifetime. That favor isn't random. It is attached to a moment, a decision, a step of obedience that aligns with divine timing. And today, whether you saw it or not, was one of those moments. When you acted, God smiled. And in that smile came movement, invisible at first, but irreversible. You must understand this. The smile of God over you is not passive. It is predictive. It means something is about to change. A delay is about to break. A barrier is about to fall. A provision is about to appear. Because when God is pleased, heaven does not stay quiet. Angels respond. Assignments shift. Atmospheres adjust. When Jesus was baptized, heaven opened and the Father declared, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Notice, this was before any miracles, before the sermons, before the cross. The favor came from identity, not accomplishment. And so it is with you. God's smile today was not because you arrived. It was because you remembered who you are. You are not being rewarded. You are being released. Released into territory that belongs to you. Released into favor that was withheld until this moment. Released into impact you didn't know was waiting, and not just for you. The smile of God over your life unlocks harvest for others. Your obedience breaks generational cycles. Your surrender heals relational wounds. Your simple yes to God activates breakthrough in people who haven't even met you yet. But this is also why the enemy attacks with urgency, because hell knows what heaven is about to release. And if the enemy can't stop God's will, he'll try to stop your awareness of it. So let me speak this clearly. God's smile over you is your confirmation. Don't wait for another sign. Don't wait for someone else's approval. Heaven already responded. But this is where many falter. Not because they failed to act, but because they underestimated what just happened. And when you misjudge the sacred, you can abort the season it was meant to begin. Because when a chosen one ignores the signs, when they downplay the divine, the consequences don't disappear. They compound. And we must speak to that next. What happens when you ignore it? The danger for the chosen one is not rebellion, it's dismissal. Shrinking back from something sacred because it looked too small. Treating divine instruction like coincidence. Calling a prophetic moment just another day. And when you do that, when you minimize what heaven magnified, you interrupt a movement God intended to multiply. Disobedience isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. It's waiting too long. It's second-guessing what you heard. It's convincing yourself that your obedience didn't matter because it didn't look like someone else's breakthrough. But in the spirit, every ignored instruction closes a door that could have opened legacy. Think of Jonah. He wasn't a false prophet. He was a reluctant one. He didn't deny his calling. He delayed it. And his delay didn't just cost him peace. It cost him presence. He lost clarity. He lost direction. He ended up in the belly of a storm, not because God changed his mind, but because Jonah thought he had more time. Delayed obedience is deception. It tells you the window will always be open, that the moment will circle back. But for the chosen, timing is territory. When you miss the moment, you forfeit momentum. And hell will gladly offer distractions dressed as comfort to keep you numb while heaven waits. This is why today matters. Why the decision you made was a rupture in the pattern. Because you didn't ignore it this time. You felt the tug and you moved. And that single act realigned everything. You may not see it yet, but something in the spirit has already shifted. But if you had ignored it, if you had silenced the nudge, you would have stayed in the cycle. The enemy wouldn't need to destroy you. He would only need to distract you long enough to miss your moment. And that's how many chosen ones are bound. Not by sin, but by delay. But not you. Not today. Today, you moved. And that movement placed you back on the path of purpose. Back in rhythm with your scroll. Back in alignment with the reason you were sent to earth. And now that you're aligned, the question must be asked. If God smiled over this, what does that say about your destiny? What weight must your calling carry if this small act triggered such a holy response? Because the smile of God is never just approval. It is activation. And your activation is a summons into something far greater than you ever expected. The divine smile and your destiny. This was never about one decision. It was about what the decision confirmed, that you are still His, that you are still listening, that despite the warfare, the silence, the disappointment, and the doubt, your spirit is still postured to say yes, and that yes, even whispered, has power. God's smile today was more than pleasure. It was prophecy. It was heaven marking you again as chosen. It was the echo of your scroll being opened in the courts of eternity. The verdict was rendered: proceed, build, heal, declare, go. Your destiny is not passive. It is seeded into everything you touch. And your obedience waters it. Your alignment matures it. Today's movement, that small act, was a sign that you are ready for the next assignment. Even if you don't feel it, even if you still limp from the last battle. Because destiny doesn't wait for your perfection. It waits for your participation. You've wondered if you missed it, if too much time passed, if the mistakes disqualified you. But listen closely. If God smiled today, then the page has turned. The story is not over. It is unfolding, and you are in motion again. Heaven is not just watching. It is investing. God is backing you with resources, with clarity, with favor. Not because of who you are in public, but because of who you chose to be in private. And now, as this chapter of Revelation settles in your spirit, the atmosphere around you is beginning to respond. What was locked is beginning to loosen. What was delayed is being rescheduled. And what was forgotten is being reanointed. Let this truth settle gently into your spirit. If God smiled over what you did today, then there is far more waiting ahead than you imagined. Destiny has responded. There are moments in the life of a chosen one when heaven doesn't answer with thunder or visions, but with a smile. And that smile is not casual. It is covenant. It is God's way of saying, I see you. I know what this cost you. I know what you overcame to take that step. That smile is a signature, a divine approval written across the pages of your journey, even in chapters you thought were too quiet to matter. In a world obsessed with noise, God still honors the whisper of surrender, the whisper of faith, the whisper of one more try. And sometimes, that whisper moves more in the spirit than the loudest declarations on earth. Because heaven is not moved by volume. It is moved by alignment. So now you know. What you did today mattered. Not because it was big, but because it was true. Because it echoed something God planted in you long before you ever knew the word chosen. And today, with that simple obedience, you step back into your scroll. You return to rhythm. You may never fully understand the ripple you just unleashed. Not yet, but one day, when you stand before the one who smiles over you now, he will show you what your obedience built. And you will weep not out of regret, but out of awe. Here is your prophetic seal. You are not hidden. You are not forgotten. You are aligned. And the smile of God is resting on your obedience, awakening the harvest that has waited for your yes. If this word found your spirit and gave language to what you felt, then let heaven know. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to know their quiet obedience is holy. Subscribe to Chosen One's Sanctuary so you never miss another revelation meant just for the remnant. And in the comments, tell us what this stirred in you. What did you feel? What did you do today that suddenly feels divine? Let this become a place of testimony, of awakening, of confirmation. Because God smiled, and that means it begins now.